My own son handed my $3.2 million villa keys to strangers while I sat right there. I'm Dr. Harold Mitchell, and for 6 months, my family thought I was losing my mind. They watched me fumble with pill bottles, saw me forget names at dinner parties, heard me ask the same questions twice. What they didn't see was the recording, device in my shirt pocket, or the neurologist colleague helping me stage every confused moment, or the estate attorney documenting their every move as they planned to ship me off to assisted living. My son, David, announced at Thanksgiving dinner in front of 52 guests that he was generously transferring my Mediterranean villa to his wife's wealthy family for me own good. Of course, because a man with Alzheimer's couldn't possibly manage such a large property. I didn't argue, didn't protest, just sat there nodding slowly while they carved up my life. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But to understand how a retired neurosurgeon ended up playing the fool at his own table, I need to take you back 6 months. It started 3 weeks after my wife Margaret's funeral. David and his wife Jessica began showing up unannounced, watching me like I was a science experiment. "Dad, you left the stove on again," Jessica announced one Tuesday morning, waving a gas bill. The kitchen could have blown up. I hadn't touched the stove in days, but I played along. "Did he? I'm sorry, sweetheart. Thank you for checking." David exchanged that look with her. The one that said, "See, it's starting." The second incident happened at my grandson's birthday party. I was telling my neighbor about Margaret's rose garden when David interrupted. "Dad, you told that same story 20 minutes ago." I hadn't, but I watched him tap his temple to Jessica, mouthing memory issues. That night, I called my former colleague, Dr. Sarah Williams. Sarah had been studying early-onset dementia for 15 years. She knew every symptom, every progression pattern. "Harold, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help me document what real cognitive decline looks like and what it doesn't. Why would you want to fake?" "Because I need to know how far they'll go, how much they're willing to take when they think I can't fight back." Sarah was quiet for 30 seconds. "And when do we start?" Wes started small, forgetting where I put my reading glasses. Asking what day it was, wasting one conversation, taking longer to respond to questions. Sarah coached me on the medical terminology David might research online. "Early-stage patients often retain long-term memory perfectly," she explained. "They can recall their medical training from 40 years ago, but can't remember what they had for breakfast." I practiced in front of my bathroom mirror. Confused expression, slower speech patterns, the slight hesitation before answering direct questions. Within 2 weeks, David was leaving printed articles about dementia on my kitchen counter. "Just some information, Dad, in case you want to read up." Jessica started speaking louder around me, slower, like I was acyled. "Harold, would you like some coffee?" She'd ask, enunciating each syllable. They began having whispered conversations in my presence, not bothering to step into another room. I was becoming invisible in my own home. The most telling moment came when David's boss visited for dinner. I was telling a story about performing surgery during a power outage in 1987. A story that showcased my steady hands and quick thinking under pressure. Dad gets confused about dates sometimes. David interrupted. That story might be from a different year. I wasn't confused. The surgery happened on October 12th, 1987. I remembered because it was Margaret's birthday. But David needed me to seem unreliable in front of his professional network. That's when I realized this wasn't just about concern for my well-being. This was about control, about David positioning himself as their responsible son managing his declining father's affairs. I started carrying Asmol digital recorder, the kind designed for medical consultations. It looked like a hearing aid battery when clipped inside my shirt pocket. Every conversation, every helpful suggestion, every time they talked about me like I wasn't there. I recorded it all, but what I captured in those early weeks was nothing compared to what came next. Because once David and Jessica realized how easy it was to manipulate a man with cognitive issues, their true intentions started showing. And that's when their plan began to unfold. By September, the stakes became crystal clear. I wasn't just losing my independence. I was losing everything Margaret and I had built together. David arrived with a folder of assisted living brochures. Sunset Manor has an excellent memory care unit. "Dad, Dr. Peterson says early intervention is crucial." Dr. Peterson, my former resident from 30 years ago, who'd apparently agreed that my episodes warranted professional supervision. "The cost is reasonable," Jessica added. "Only $8,200 per month." Only as if bleeding $984,400 annually for my retirement savings was pocket change. I pretended to study the glossy photos of smiling elderly residents playing checkers, generic paintings on sterile walls, medication schedules posted by every doorway. "What about the villa?" I asked slowly, practicing my confused elderly voice. "That's the thing, Dad." David sat forward. "You can't maintain a 4,800 FT property anymore. Jessica's parents offered to take over the mortgage and property management just temporarily until you're feeling better. Jessica's parents, the Hendersons, who owned 3 investment properties in Scottsdale and had been eyeing my Mediterranean-style villa since we moved in. They'd handle everything, Jessica said. Landscaping, pool maintenance, security system. You wouldn't have to worry about anything, except the villa wasn't mortgaged. Margaret and I had paid it off in 2019 with the proceeds from selling my medical practice. The property was worth $3.2 million, free and clear. I'd never told David about the real estate value. As far as he knew, we still owed $400,000 to the bank. What about my things? I asked. Margaret's garden. We'll store everything safely, David promised. The important stuff. 43 years of marriage. Margaret's hand-planted roses. The study where I'd written medical journals. The breakfast nook where we'd shared coffee every morning until cancer took her. That night, I called my estate attorney, Patricia Davis. Patricia had handled our wills and trusts for 20 years. She knew every asset, every legal protection we put in place. Harold, you know they can't force you into assisted living without a court order. And they certainly can't transfer your property without your explicit consent. What if I'm declared mentally incompetent? That requires multiple medical evaluations, court hearings, legal representation. It's not something that happens overnight. But what if I appear to consent? What if I seem to agree because I'm confused? Patricia was quiet. Harold, what exactly are you planning? I need you to document everything, every conversation, every attempt to manipulate my decision-making. I need legal proof of what they're really trying to do. She agreed to help, but only after I explained Sarah's involvement and showed her the recordings I'd already collected. This is either brilliant or completely insane, Patricia said. Maybe both. The real breakthrough came 3 days later. I was sitting in my study, supposedly napping, when David and Jessica returned from their lawyer's office. The power of attorney paperwork is straightforward. Jessica said, once Dad signs, you can handle all his finances. What about the property transfer? Mr. Henderson's lawyer says we can structure it as a family gift. Dad gives the villa to my parents. They handle the expenses. Everyone wins, except Dad loses his home. Dad's losing his memory anyway. At least this way the house stays in good hands. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, digital recorder running. What if he changes his mind later? How can he change his mind if he doesn't remembering the decision? There it was, the real strategy. Use my supposed cognitive decline to justify decisions I'd never actually make. Lock me into agreements while claiming I was too confused to understand the consequences. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd never actually gotten me properly evaluated by an objective neurologist. Dr. Peterson's assessment was based on David's description of my behavior, not any clinical examination. According to Sarah, a real dementia diagnosis required extensive testing, cognitive assessments, brain imaging, months of documented decline, none of which had happened. We should move fast, Jessica continued, before Dad has any more lucid moments. Lucid moments, as if my entire life was now divided between confusion and brief flashes of clarity. That night, I sat in Margaret's garden and made my decision. They wanted to use my supposed helplessness against me. Fine. But I was going to document every step of their betrayal, every lie, every manipulation, and when the time came to reveal the truth, I'd have an audience they'd never expect, because David had just made the mistake of announcing our family's Thanksgiving dinner to everyone at his office. 52 guests, including his boss, Jessica's extended family, and half our neighborhood, the perfect stage for a very public reckoning. The first real confrontation came on October 3rd. David arrived with official-looking documents and Jessica's father, Robert Henderson. Henderson was everything David aspired to be. Investment banker, country club member, the kind of man who wore his wealth like expensive cologne, subtle but unmistakable. Dr. Mitchell, Henderson said, shaking my hand with practiced sincerity. David's told me so much about your situation. My situation, like dementia, was something I'd chosen. Harold, David said, spreading papers across my dining table. We need to discuss the property transfer. I looked at the documents slowly, practicing the confused squint Sarah had taught me. Transfer to make things easier for you, Dad, so you don't have to worry about maintenance. Henderson leaned forward. Doctor, my wife and I have managed rental properties for 20 years. We understand the complexities of home ownership. The house needs work, Jessica added. The roof, the pool system, the landscaping. It's too much for someone in your condition. My condition. I designed medical equipment that saved lives. Now, I supposedly couldn't handle a sprinkler timer. What work? I asked. Dad, you called me last week about a leak in the guest bathroom. I hadn't called him about anything, but the recorder in my pocket captured every word. The property management alone cost $2,400 monthly, Henderson said. Plus insurance, taxes, utilities. We're talking $45,000 annually. True numbers, he'd done his homework. But if we handle everything, Henderson continued, you won't have those expenses. What about selling? David and Henderson exchanged glances. Quick, nervous. Dad, the market's terrible right now. You'd lose money, also false. Scottsdale real estate had increased 12% since January. Besides, Jessica said, this way the house stays in the family. Henderson's family, not mine. I need to think, I said. Of course, Henderson said. Take your time. But David's jaw tightened. Dad, we can't wait forever. Every month you delay costs more money, David. My voice carried just enough authority to remind him who he was talking to. I said, "You need to think." Henderson stood quickly. "Absolutely. This is a big decision." After they left, I called Patricia. "They're pushing hard," I said. "Harold, those documents Henderson brought, they're legitimate property transfer forms. If you sign them, your house legally becomes his. Even if I'm mentally incompetent, that's the gray area they're exploiting. If you appear to consent, even while confused, the transfer could stand, especially if there's no official competency evaluation on record. What about David's power of attorney request? Even more dangerous. Once he's financial power of attorney, he can make property decisions on your behalf." That evening, David returned alone. "Dad, I'm concerned about this afternoon. You seemed agitated, did I? Maybe we should schedule another appointment with Dr. Peterson." "Why?" "To assess your current state. Make sure you're comfortable with the decisions we're discussing." "Comfortable?" As if comfort had anything to do with losing my home. "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you remember why your mother and I bought this house?" His expression softened slightly. "For the garden? Mom wanted space for her roses and the study so you could write your medical papers in the guest wing. For when we visited with the grandkids. For a moment, I saw my son again. The boy who'd helped Margaret plant bulbs every spring. Who'd brought his children here for birthday parties and Christmas mornings. Dad, I know this is hard, but Mom's gone. The grandkids are older now. You don't need all this space. What if I'm not as sick as you think?" David's patience cracked. "Dad, you asked me the same question about Margaret's roses 3 times yesterday." I hadn't asked him anything about roses yesterday. We hadn't even spoken. "You forgot Jessica's birthday last month." "Jessica's birthday was in December. It was October. You called me at 2 a.m. asking where you were. I'd been asleep at 2 a.m. My phone records would prove it. But David believed his own lies, or needed me to believe them. "I'm trying to help you," he said, "by taking my house, by making sure you're safe." Safe from what? From yourself. There it was, his real justification. I wasn't just sick. I was dangerous to myself, to others, a liability that needed managing. The Hendersons are good people, Dad. They'll take care of the property. What about taking care of me? That's what Sunset Manor is for. Sunset Manor, where they'd warehouse me while Henderson's family enjoyed Margaret's garden. "I need more time," I said. "How much time?" "Until after Thanksgiving." David hesitated. "Dad, that's 6 weeks. I want one last holiday in this house." "Fine. But after Thanksgiving, we make the decision." After he left, I sat in Margaret's garden and watched the sunset. In 6 weeks, 52 people would witness the truth. David had no idea what kind of decision was really coming. October brought subtle signs that my decline might not be as complete as my family believed. Dr. Sarah Williams started visiting more frequently. Officially, she was checking on my cognitive state. Unofficially, she was helping me perfect the performance of a lifetime. "Harold, when you respond to complex questions at a 2-con delay," she coached, "early-stage patients process information slower, but they still process it correctly. What about medical terminology? That's tricky. Your professional vocabulary would remain largely intact, but you might struggle to find common words." We practiced during her evaluation sessions. Sarah would bring her medical bag, the same leather case she'd carried since 1987. To anyone watching, she was conducting routine cognitive assessments. In reality, she was teaching me how to fail them convincingly. "Describe the surgical procedure you performed most frequently," she'd say in her clinical voice. "Craniotomy for 4 that I'd looking frustrated. The pressure thing in the brain, intracranial pressure. Yes, that a real Alzheimer's patient might retain complex medical knowledge while losing simple vocabulary. I was learning to be authentically inconsistent, but the most important coaching came from Patricia Davis. She arrived every Thursday with her legal briefcase, ostensibly to review my affairs in case my condition worsened. "Harold, I need you to understand the legal framework they're operating within," she explained. "If they can establish a pattern of cognitive decline, they can justify emergency guardianship proceedings. How much evidence do they need? Surprisingly little. Testimony from family members, a doctor's opinion, documentation of poor decision-making. What constitutes poor decision? Financial choices that seem irrational, safety risks in the home, inability to manage basic self-care." It thought about David's fabricated phone calls. Jessica's invented stove incidents, the carefully constructed narrative of a man losing his grip on reality. "But here's what they don't know," Patricia continued. "I've been documenting everything, every visit, every conversation, every attempt to manipulate your decisions." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Medical records showing your perfect health from your annual physical in August. Financial records showing your competent management of a $4.8 million portfolio. Property records proving the villa is owned free and clear. What about the recordings? Legally admissible. Arizona is a one-party consent state. You can record any conversation you're part of." Their recordings were getting more damaging by the week. David discussing my inevitable placement with Jessica. Henderson calculating property management fees. Jessica researching my medical history online. But the most revealing conversation happened during David's visit on October 20th. Mom, he'd called Jessica while standing in my kitchen. He thought I was napping. The power of attorney forms are ready. Dad just needs to sign them. I couldn't hear Jessica's response, but David's side was clear enough. No, he hasn't been officially diagnosed. Dr. Peterson is just going off our descriptions. Pause. Of course, he seems normal sometimes. That's how early Alzheimer's works. Longer pause. Look, the Hendersons want to move forward. If we wait much longer, Dad might have a lucid period and change his mind. As if my current mental state was the aberration, not the clarity. After Thanksgiving, we'll have everything finalized. The house transfer, the assisted living placement, all of it. But David had made one crucial error. He told his office about Ur family Thanksgiving dinner. 52 confirmed guests, including his boss and 3 senior partners from his investment firm. He wanted to show off the successful son, managing his aging father's transition with dignity and grace. What he didn't realize was that he'd just assembled the perfect audience for a very public education about family loyalty and respect. My old colleague, Dr. Williams, would be there. She'd already agreed to bring certain medical documents. Patricia Davis would attend as our longtime family attorney. She'd have her legal folder ready, and I'd have 6 weeks of recorded conversations proving exactly what kind of son David had become. The stage was set. The players were positioned. David thought Thanksgiving would be his moment of triumph. He had no idea it would be his day of reckoning. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and clear. Perfect weather for what David had planned. As the culmination of his careful strategy, 52 guests began arriving at 2 p.m. David's colleagues from the investment firm, Jessica's extended family, including her parents, Robert and Linda Henderson, neighbors who'd known Margaret and me for 15 years. I watched from my study window as expensive cars filled the circular driveway. BMWs, Mercedes, Tesla Model S, sedans. David had invited everyone who mattered in his professional and social circles. Dad, you should get ready. Jessica called up the stairs. People are starting to ask about you. I came downstairs wearing my best cardigan, the one Margaret had bought me for our 40th anniversary. Navy blue cashmere with leather buttons. Harold? Robert Henderson approached with his practiced smile. You look wonderful. Thank you, Robert. How's Linda? She's excited about the dinner. Jessica's told us so much about your transition plans. Transition plans? Like I was changing careers instead of being shipped off tootie in an institution. David played the perfect host, introducing me to his colleagues with just the right mixture of pride and gentle concern. This is my father, Dr. Harold Mitchell, retired neurosurgeon. Built quite a reputation at Phoenix General. Impressive, said David's boss, Martin Crawford. How are you enjoying retirement, doctor? It has its challenges, I said slowly, practicing my uncertain elderly voice. David jumped in quickly. Dad's been dealing with some health issues lately, memory concerns. Crawford nodded sympathetically. My own father went through something similar. It's difficult for everyone. We're fortunate to have excellent support, Jessica added. My parents have been incredible, helping us navigate the care options. Linda Henderson appeared at my elbow. Harold, the villa is just beautiful. Robert and I were admiring Margaret's rose garden. She loved those roses, I said. It must be overwhelming to maintain everything yourself sometimes. Well, you won't have to worry about that much longer. By 4 p.m., all 52 guests had arrived. David had strategically seated me at the head of the main dining table, surrounded by his most important business contacts. Before we eat, David announced, standing with his wine glass, I want to share some family news. The room quieted. 52 pairs of eyes focused on my son. Many of you know that Dad has been facing some health challenges lately. Early-stage dementia is a difficult journey for any family. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. But Jessica and I have been blessed with incredible support, particularly from her parents, Robert and Linda Henderson. Robert Henderson stood clearly rehearsed for this moment. Harold and Margaret have been like family to us for years, he began. When we learned about Harold's condition, we knew we had to help. The villa requires extensive maintenance, Jessica added. Pool systems, landscaping, security. It's really too much for someone dealing with cognitive decline. David resumed control of the narrative. So we've made a decision, as a family. Effective December 1st, Robert and Linda will be taking over full management of the property. Crawford leaned forward. That's very generous. Dad will be transitioning to a wonderful memory care facility, David continued. Sunset Manor has an excellent program specifically designed for early-stage Alzheimer's patients. The guest nodded approvingly. What a caring son. What a difficult but necessary decision. The Hendersons will ensure that Dad's childhood home remains in loving hands. Jessica said it's really the perfect solution. Perfect for everyone except me. Robert Henderson raised his glass to family and to making difficult decisions with love and compassion. To family, the guests echoed. I sat quietly, playing my role as the confused elderlyman whose fate was being decided by more capable minds. But I noticed a few things David hadn't anticipated. Dr. Sarah Williams had arrived during the announcement. She stood near the kitchen entrance, medical bag in hand, watching David's performance with professional interest. Patricia Davis sat at the far end of the dining room, her legal briefcase positioned beside her chair, and my neighbor, Detective Mark Johnson, was recording something on his phone. David had invited him as a friend. Not realizing Mark's professional instincts about family situations, "Harold," Crawford said gently, "how do you feel about these arrangements?" It sounds good," I said slowly. "I trust David. That's wonderful. Can't be easy giving up your independence." "No," I agreed. "It's not easy." But what Crawford didn't know, what none of David's colleagues knew, was that Arizona law required specific procedures for transferring property from someone with cognitive impairment, medical evaluations, legal safeguards, court oversight, none of which had happened. Actually, a clear voice said from across the room, there might be some legal complications with that timeline. Everyone turned. Patricia Davis stood briefcase in hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she continued, "but as the family's attorney, I have some concerns about the proposed property transfer." David's smile faltered. "Patricia, we discussed this. Everything's been handled properly." Actually, it hasn't. The room fell silent. 52 guests suddenly found themselves witnessing something more dramatic than a family announcement. They were about to witness a family explosion, and I was about to reveal that the confused old man they'd been pitting had been recording every single word they'd said for the past 6 months. Patricia Davis opened her briefcase with deliberate precision. The metallic click echoed through the suddenly silent dining room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but there are some facts about the situation that need clarification." David's face flushed red. "Patricia, this isn't the time." "Actually, this is exactly the time." She pulled out a thick folder, especially since you've made this announcement in front of 52 witnesses. Jessica grabbed David's arm. "What is she talking about?" "Mr. Henderson," Patricia continued, "you mentioned taking over property management for someone with cognitive decline. Can you tell me what medical documentation you've reviewed to confirm Dr. Mitchell's condition?" Robert Henderson looked confused. "Well, David and Jessica have kept us informed about Harold's diagnosis." "What diagnosis?" "The Alzheimer's early-stage dementia." "From which physician?" Henderson glanced at David. "Dr. Peterson, I believe." Patricia nodded. "Dr. Peterson, who hasn't actually examined Harold in 18 months, whose assessment was based entirely on family reports of concerning behavior." The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the heartwarming family story they'd expected. "Now," Patricia said, "let me share what proper medical evaluation looks like." She gestured toward the kitchen entrance. "Dr. Sarah Williams, would you join us, please?" Sarah stepped forward, medical bag in hand. Several guests recognized her. She'd been featured in Phoenix magazine for her dementia research. "Dr. Williams is one of Arizona's leading neurologists," Patricia announced. "She's been conducting comprehensive evaluations of Harold's cognitive function for the past 6 months." David went pale. We didn't authorize any." "Harold authorized it himself," Sarah interrupted, "as is his right as a competent adult." She opened her medical bag and pulled out official documents. "Neuropsychological assessment completed October 15th. Cognitive function. Tests administered October 20th. Brain. Imaging studies from October 25th. The room was dead. Silent, there sat Sarah. Looked directly at David. Perfect cognitive function. No signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other neurological impairment." Jessica gasped. "That's impossible. We've seen the symptoms." "What symptoms?" Sarah asked. "The confusion, the memory lapses, the repeated questions." Sarah smiled. "Dr. Mitchell, would you like to address those symptoms yourself?" I stood slowly, maintaining my elderly mannerisms for just a moment longer. Then I straightened my shoulders and looked directly at my son. "David, I haven't forgotten a single thing you've said in the past 6 months." My voice was clear, strong, unmistakably sharp. "I remember every lie you told about phone calls I never made, every fake emergency you invented, every conversation you had about shipping me off to assisted living." David stumbled backward. "Dad, what are you?" "I remember you telling Jessica that I was losing it anyway. Saw nobody would question the property transfer." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I remember Robert calculating property management fees for a house he thought he was getting for free." Henderson's face went white. "And I remember you telling your colleagues that dealing with my deterioration was exhausting, but at least the house would stay in good hands." I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder. "Would you like to hear some of those conversations?" The dining room erupted in whispers. David's colleagues were staring at him in shock. Henderson was backing toward the door. 6 months, I continued. 23 hours of recorded conversations, every manipulation, every lie, every plan to steal my home while pretending it was for my own good. "Dad, we were trying to help." "Help?" My voice cut through his protest like a scalpel. "You were trying to commit elder abuse, and you were stupid enough to do it in front of witnesses." Martin Crawford stood abruptly. "David, I think we should." "Mr. Crawford," Patricia interrupted, "as David's supervisor, you should know that this company's ethics policy specifically addresses elder abuse. It's grounds for immediate termination. Crawford looked sick. I pressed play on the recorder. David's voice filled the room. Look, the Hendersons want to move forward. If we wait much longer, Dad might have a lucid period and change his mind. Then Jessica's voice. What if he changes his mind later? David again. How can he change his mind if he doesn't remember making the decision? The guest stared in horror. These weren't the words of concerned children. These were the words of calculating thieves. Detective Mark Johnson stood up. Harold, I need to ask, did you consent to any of these recordings? They're all conversations I was part of, Mark. Arizona is a one-party consent state, and the medical evaluations were legitimate. Sarah nodded. Completely legitimate. Harold requested comprehensive testing to establish his mental competency. Jessica was crying now. Harold, we were told. You were told what you wanted to hear, I said. That I was weak, confused, easy to manipulate. I looked around the room at 152 shocked faces. But here's what you really need to know about this situation. David doesn't just want my house. He needs it. Patricia pulled out another document. David's financial records show significant debt. Credit cards maxed out. A second mortgage he's been hiding from Jessica. Jessica spun around. What second mortgage? $80,000. Patricia continued. Due in full by December 31st. David. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. David's shoulders sagged. I was going to tell you. When after you stole my father's house to pay for it. The room was watching a family implode in real time. Robert Henderson was edging toward the exit. I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I said, was thinking I wouldn't fight back. I looked at David, my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, whose college tuition I'd paid, whose wedding I'd hosted in this very house. You wanted me gone, David. Congratulations. I turned to address the 52 witnesses. This dinner is over. Everyone except Dr. Williams, Attorney Davis, and Detective Johnson needs to leave now. As the guests filed out in stunned silence, David made one last desperate attempt. Dad, please, we can work this out. Family, I said quietly, should never have to hide recording devices to protect themselves from their own children. The front door closed behind the last guest. David and Jessica stood alone in my dining room, surrounded by the ruins of their carefully constructed lies. And I was just getting started. With the guests gone, my dining room felt smaller, more intimate, perfect for what came next. Detective Mark Johnson set his phone on the table, still recording. Harold, I need to establish a timeline for the record. Of course, Patricia Davis opened a second folder. These are the documents David and the Hendersons attempted to have you sign. I examined the property transfer forms. My signature line was highlighted in yellow. When was I supposed to sign these? Tomorrow, Jessica whispered. We were going to do it tomorrow morning. 24 hours? I'd almost lost everything in 24 hours. David, I said calmly, do you understand what you've just confessed to in front of a police detective? David was staring at his hands. Dad, I never meant you never meant to get caught. Dr. Williams pulled out her official letterhead. I'm documenting that Harold Mitchell shows no signs of cognitive impairment, dementia, or any condition that would affect his decision-making capacity. She looked directly at David. Any medical professional who suggests otherwise without proper examination could face ethics violations. David's face went gray. Dr. Peterson said what you told him to say, Sarah interrupted, based on your fabricated reports of symptoms that never existed. Mark Johnson leaned forward. David, I need to ask directly. Did you and Jessica plan to transfer your father's property without his informed consent? We thought he was sick. That's not what I asked about. Long pause. Yes. Did you coordinate with Robert Henderson to take possession of property worth $3.2 million? It wasn't supposed to be permanent. Yes or no? Yes, Jessica was sobbing now. David, what have you done? What he did done was commit multiple felonies in front of witnesses, but I wasn't finished with him yet. Patricia, I said, please read the property ownership documents. Patricia pulled out the villa's deed. Property at 4847 Desert Vista Drive, Scottsdale, Arizona. Owned free and clear by Harold Mitchell. Appraised value as of September 2024, $3.2 million. Any mortgages or liens? None. Any legal authority for David Mitchell to transfer this property? None whatsoever. I turned to David. So explain to me how you plan to give away something that was never yours. The power of attorney, which I never signed, but you were going to base on lies about my mental capacity. Mark Johnson was taking notes. Harold, do you want top press charges? The room went silent. David looked up at me with desperate eyes. Dad, please. I know this looks bad, but we're family. Family? I stood up slowly. Let me tell you about family, David. I walked to the window, overlooking Margaret's garden. Family means your mother spent her last 3 months in this house, in this garden, because she wanted to die where she was, happy. I turned back to face him. Family means I worked 16-hour days for 40 years to build something I could leave to my children. My voice stayed calm, controlled. Family means when your son needed $50,000 for graduate school, you don't hesitate. When he can't afford his wedding, you write the check. When his first business fails, You cover his debts without making him feel ashamed. David was crying now. But family also means when your father is grieving his wife of 43 years, you don't see opportunity. You see someone who needs support. I sat back down facing him directly. Mark, I want a restraining order. David and Jessica are not allowed on this property. Dad, I want all financial power of attorney documents voided and destroyed. Harold, I want David's debt investigated. I want to know exactly how much money he owes and to whom. Patricia was writing rapidly. I'll have their restraining order filed tomorrow morning. And Mark, I continued, I want you to investigate whether Robert Henderson knew this was fraud. Mark nodded. I'll need copies of all the recordings. Of course, David stood unsteadily. Dad, what about my job? If a Crawford reports this, you should have thought about that before you tried to steal my house. I'll lose everything. I looked at my son. Really? Looked at him. The man who'd been willing to warehouse his own father to solve his financial problems. David, you already lost everything. You just don't realize it yet. Jessica grabbed David's arm. We need to leave. One more thing, I said as they reached the door. Your children, my grandchildren. They stopped. They're welcome here anytime, but you're not. And if you try to use them as leverage, if you try to manipulate them the way you manipulated me, that access ends permanently. David opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. The door locks will be changed tomorrow, Patricia added. Any attempt to enter this property will result in trespassing charges. As they left, Jessica turned back one last time. Harold, I'm sorry. I really thought. You thought an old man with a dead wife would be easy to control. She flinched. You were wrong. After they left, the house felt peaceful for the first time in months. Mark Johnson finished his notes. Harold, this case will take time to investigate fully. I understand, but based on what I've seen tonight, there are definitely grounds for elder abuse charges. Sarah packed up her medical bag. I'll submit my official evaluation to the court tomorrow. You're competent to make all your own decisions. Patricia organized her legal documents. The property I secure, the power of attorney attempts are void. You're legally protected. I walked them to the door, then returned to Margaret's garden. Tomorrow the real consequences would begin. Tonight, I was just a man sitting in his wife's roses, finally able to think clearly. For the first time in 6 months, I wasn't pretending to be confused. I was exactly where I belonged. The aftermath began before sunrise the next morning. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Martin Crawford's name appeared on the screen. Dr. Mitchell, this is Martin Crawford, David's supervisor. I need to discuss what happened at your dinner last night. Of course, sir. I want you to know that Pinnacle Investment Group takes elder abuse allegations extremely seriously. David has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. I appreciate that, Martin. Doctor, can you tell me in your professional opinion, was David's behavior criminal? Asked Detective Johnson. He's handling the investigation. Will there be media coverage? I paused. Why do you ask? Our firm manages retirement accounts for several thousand clients. If word gets out that one of our senior managers was involved in financial elder abuse, you're worried about your reputation. I'm worried about our clients' confidence in our ethical standards. Then, you should have been more careful about who you promoted to senior management. Crawford was quiet for 30 seconds. Dr. Mitchell, is there anything we can do to minimize the public impact of this situation? You can fire David, sir, today publicly with a statement about your company's zero tolerance for financial crimes against vulnerable populations. But he hasn't been convicted. He confessed in front of 52 witnesses. What more do you need? Crawford hung up. At 9:15 a.m., Detective Johnson arrived with 2 additional officers and a forensic accountant. Harold, we need to examine David's financial records. The district attorney is considering multiple charges. What kind of charges? Elder abuse, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit theft. If we can prove he falsified medical information, possibly forgery. The forensic accountant, Maria Santos, spread David's financial documents across my dining table. Dr. Mitchell, your son is in serious debt. Credit cards, business loans, the second mortgage on his house. Total liability, $340,000. How much of that was hidden from Jessica? About $180,000. The second mortgage was taken out without her knowledge. Is that legal? Technically, yes, but ethically questionable, especially for someone in financial services. Mark Johnson pulled out his investigation file. Harold, we interviewed Robert Henderson this morning. He claims he didn't know about David's debt problems. Do you believe him? No. Henderson's been researching Arizona property law for 6 months. Heck knew exactly what he was trying to acquire. What about Linda Henderson? She's claiming ignorance. Says she thought this was a legitimate family arrangement. Maria Santos looked up from the financial documents. Dr. Mitchell, there's something else. David borrowed $50,000 from his company's client discretionary fund 18 months ago. Is that legal? Only with proper authorization and collateral. He used your medical practice sale as an authorized collateral. I stared at her. My medical practice? He told Pinnacle that you'd co-signed the loan. That your $1.2 million practice sale precedes guaranteed repayment. I never co-signed anything. We know that's forgery. The phone rang again. Patricia Davis. Harold, I have updates. Their restraining order is in effect. David and Jessica are legally prohibited from contacting you or approaching your property. What about the property transfer documents? Voided. I've also filed a protective order on your financial accounts. David can't access anything. Good, but Harold, there's something else. Jessica filed for divorce this morning. I wasn't surprised. On what grounds? Financial fraud, hidden debt, endangering family assets through criminal activity. Smart woman. She wants to protect herself and the children from David's legal problems. At 2:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my granddaughter, Emma, 16 years old, honor roll student. Margaret's eyes. Grandpa. Emma, come in, sweetheart. Dad said I'm not supposed to visit anymore. Your father doesn't make those rules. She hugged me tightly. Grandpa, what happened? Mom's crying all the time and Dad's talking to lawyers. I led her to the kitchen and made hot chocolate the way Margaret used to. Emma, what has your father told you about my health? That you have Alzheimer's? That you can't live alone anymore? Do I seem sick to you? She studied my face carefully. No, you seem like yourself. Good, because I am myself. Your father lied about my health to justify stealing this house. That's impossible. I showed her the medical evaluation from Dr. Williams, the legal documents from Patricia, the financial records showing David's debt. Grandpa, are you saying Dad tried to steal your house? I'm saying he did more than try. Emma read through the documents silently. When she finished, she was crying. Why would he do this? Because he needed money and thought I was too weak to stop him. But you're not weak. No, sweetheart, I'm not. What happens to Dad now? He'll face the consequences of his choices. What about Mom? Your mother is protecting herself and you children. That's what good parents do. Emma finished her hot chocolate. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Anything? When Dad was my age, was he like this? I thought about David at 16. Ambitious, competitive, but honest. No, Emma, he wasn't. Then what changed? He started believing that success mattered more than integrity. Is he going to jail? I don't know, but he's going to lose his job, his house, probably his marriage. Are you sad about that? I looked out at Margaret's garden. I'm sad that it came to this, but I'm not sad that he's facing consequences. Will you forgive him? Forgiveness and trust are different things, Emma. I might forgive him someday, but I'll never trust him again. That evening, the local news ran a story about the elder abuse investigation. They didn't use names, but the financial services industry is small. By morning, everyone at Pinnacle Investment Group would know. At 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dad, please call me. We need Toduck. David, I deleted the message. At 9:00 p.m., another text. Dad, I know you're angry, but we're family. Please don't destroy my life over this. I deleted that one too. At 10 p.m., fine, I get it. You win. But what about your grandchildren? They need their father. It turned off my phone. David had 6 months to think about his grandchildren while he was planning to steal their grandfather's house. Now it was my turn to think about what kind of relationship, if any, we could ever have again. But tonight, I was just going to sit in Margaret's garden and remember what it felt like to trust my own family, before I learned that trust was something I needed to record to protect. 3 weeks later, I stood in Margaret's rose garden watching the sunrise. The November air was crisp, but the roses were still blooming. Hardy dessert varieties that Margaret had chosen specifically because they thrived in difficult conditions, like their gardener. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. Emma stood on my doorstep with a duffel bag and tears in her eyes. Grandpa, can I stay here today? Mom and Dad are meeting with lawyers again. Of course. You're always welcome here. We made breakfast together in the kitchen, where Margaret used to teach her to bake cookies. Emma cracked eggs while I handled the bacon. How are you doing with everything, sweetheart? I keep thinking about what you said about Dad choosing success over integrity. What about it? I don't want to be like that. I flipped the bacon carefully. Then didn't be. But how do you know when you're crossing the line? You listen to the voice in your head that says, this feels wrong. And when you hear that voice, you stop. What if the wrong thing is easier? It usually is. That's why it's called a choice. Emma was quiet for a moment. Grandpa, are you lonely here by yourself? Sometimes, but I'm not alone. What's the difference? Lonely is feeling sad about being by yourself. Alone is just being by yourself. Do you miss Dad? I miss who he used to be after breakfast. Emma helped me in the garden. We replanted the bulbs that would bloom in Margaret's memory next spring. Grandpa, will you tell me about Grandma when she was younger? So, I told her stories about Margaret's terrible cooking when we were newlyweds, about their stubborn insistence on planting roses in the desert, about the way she hummed while doing crossword puzzles. She sounds perfect. She wasn't perfect, but she was honest and kind, and she never tried to take advantage of people who trusted her, like Dad did, like your father did. At noon, Patricia Davis called with updates. Harold. David accepted a plea bargain. Guilty to attempted elder abuse, 2 years, probation, $25,000 fine, community service, no jail time. The prosecutor felt probation was appropriate for a first offense, but David's permanently barred from working in financial services. What about Henderson? Charges dropped. Not enough evidence that Hick knew about the fraud and David's job. Terminated this morning. Pinnacle issued public statement about their zero tolerance policy. I hung up and found Emma reading in Margaret's study. Was that about Dad? Yes. Is he going to be okay? He'll survive, but his life is going to be very, very different. Good, different, or bad, different. That depends on what he learns from this experience. That evening, Emma's mother, Jessica, came to pick her up. We spoke briefly on the front porch. Harold, I want you to know I had no idea about David's debt or his plans for the property transfer. I believe you, Jessica. I'm filing for full custody of the children. David's behavior. I can't trust him around their finances either. That's probably wise. Harold, I know this is awkward, but could the children still visit you? They love this house, this garden, the memories of their grandmother. I looked at Emma, who was listening from the doorway. Jessica, they're welcome here anytime. This is their grandfather's house, not their father's. Thank you. After they left, I walked through the empty villa, 4,800 square FT, that Margaret and I had filled with 43 years of marriage. I wasn't lonely. I was finally at peace. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, turned off. David had sent 17 more texts in the past 3 weeks. I'd read none of them. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear what he had to say. Maybe someday he'd be ready to say something worth hearing. But night, I was content to sit in my wife's garden and remember what it felt like to be home. Really home. Not just in a house, but in a life built on trust and respect and love. The kind of life me grandchildren deserve to inherit. The kind of life I'd almost lost to a son who forgot. That some things are more valuable than money. But I didn't lose it. Because sometimes, the best way to protect what you love is to pretend you're too weak to fight for it, until the moment you prove them wrong. What's your story? Have you ever had to protect yourself from your own family? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most.